Hello, everyone, and welcome to our information session for the American Academy of Religion Northeast. This is our very first public gathering as a new entity, and I'm really excited to be here. As I mentioned to those that are on the call first, and I want to just reiterate for those that are watching this online, we really appreciate your participation in this information session and for watching this brief video. We are here to talk a little bit about what we're up to in the regional offerings that the AAR is providing. For those of you who have not met me yet, I've met most people here, but for those who have not, my name is Matthew Vaughan, and I am the formal regional coordinator of the American Academy of Religion's Mid-Atlantic region. But now I serve on the board of directors as our regions director. So all 9 of the regions across the country and into Canada report to me, and then I send that out to the rest of the board. And I am in charge of basically just making sure everything goes smoothly for folks like Ron and Justin, who are going to be leading our time today, and for making sure it's easy for folks like yourselves to get involved and to stay plugged in with the AAR moving forward. In my capacity with the Regions Director, I also supervise our regional offerings at the National Convention. And so I want to just go ahead and put a plug in for our regional forum that I will be sending out an email about to our larger community, so you don't need to take notes or anything. But on Saturday afternoon at 5 p.m., somewhere in the convention center, I can't remember exact location, we will be having our regional council forum. And in that meeting, you will have an opportunity to learn a little bit about some of the past recipients of our regional development grants. You'll have an opportunity to meet other regional leaders from around the country and into Canada. And it'll just be a really nice time to get to know some of the different ways folks are getting involved with the AAR. I'm going to turn things over now to Ron Bernier, who is our regional coordinator. We actually are using the term Chief Regional Officer now, so pardon me for those that are watching from National. So old habits are hard to break. But Ron is leading the charge in this new and newly formed regional endeavor. I'm going to turn things over to him, after which time Justin Doran, who's going to be serving as who is serving right now as our interim president, and we're hoping to formalize that very soon, is going to speak to us a little bit about some of the transition plans and what it will look like when we formally relaunch in the next few months. That being said, I will be around through the end of this call. If there are any questions that you have about your involvement, about what's going on in regions generally, I hope you will feel free to bring those questions to me. And of course, you've all got my email through our various blasts. So with that, I just want to reiterate my appreciation to you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you're doing with the AAR and your involvement with us as a region. Ron, thank you for your leadership. And with that, I'm going to take things off my mic and into yours.
Great. Thanks, Matt. For those of you who have not, excuse me, losing my voice. Those of you who have not met, my name is Ron Bernier. I'm professor of humanities at Wentworth Institute of Technology in Boston. And I am the outgoing, I guess it is, regional elected coordinator of the former NEMAR group. I'm coming to the end of what would have been my second term as regionally elected coordinator, or what do we call it? Chief Regional Officer, we're calling it now. As you may or may not know, well, some of you may have been at the meeting in February of last year when we gathered together for the first time post-pandemic for a conference at Princeton Theological. And it was there that we began to talk a little bit at the business meeting about rethinking our regions. During the pandemic years and just after, Matthew and I had worked closely in joint projects, like a symposium in 2021, and what else was there? There was the podcast, and then of course in February of 23 was when we were at Princeton, and that really seemed to work well in joining forces. And as the conversation progressed, we felt that we'd be stronger in greater numbers if we were to merge formerly NEMAR, New England and Maritimes region, and the Mid-Atlantic. It took probably a little bit longer than I would have guessed to get this all in order, the logistics. There was things like the operating agreement, questions about geography, who was moving where, finances, and so on. But we got all that sorted out, and as Matthew said at the start, this really is our first public launch of AAR Northeast. And I think the real excitement of what we have been doing over the last year is not so much rearranging the structure of the organization, but also rethinking what it is we as a region want to be doing as a group of professionals together, whether that's to continue on with the conference or to add other things to the mix. And that's really what we're here to hear about tonight. So I think what I'm going to do is just turn it over to Justin, who has, I think, Justin, you have some slides or a PowerPoint of some kind.
Yeah, I'll take over. Yeah, and before I jump into the slides, I'll just introduce myself. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Justin Doran. I'm assistant professor of religion at Middlebury College. I was formerly the president of the New England region, and then I've taken over as the interim president of AAR-NE, calling it AAR-NE, AAR-NE, yeah, AAR-NE. And what I am going to talk today about is really how we're reconceiving the structure in a pretty radical way. I don't want to oversell, but also not undersell just how much we plan on changing it. And we're kind of soliciting feedback at this point, but this new format and these new ideas around how we should kind of work together at the regional level really has come out of years of conversation, both in this region and then previously when I was in the Southwest region. There was a lot of conversations about attempting to basically facilitate our work as professionals in ways that emphasize the regional strengths rather than kind of work against our strengths. So let's see if we can, I'll do a slides. Okay. Slideshow. All right, is everybody seeing slides? Awesome. Okay, so it's a nice title slide. So really, you should think of this as a new regional structure. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about how the annual meeting will take place, but the annual meeting will still exist. We still plan on organizing the annual meeting, but it might look a little bit different based on how this new structure works. So let me first outline kind of what we see as the problem of the regional. And it's a problem in other regionals as well, but it's really an acute problem for the New England region. And it's acute, particularly because we have we're kind of blessed by having a high concentration of extremely elite universities that have a ton of resources themselves that in some senses are doing what regionals do, but at the institutional level, at the university level. So this is a diagram that is basically showing what we think of as the core life cycle problem of the regional. And what it is, in the simplest possible terms, is we compete with the national. We shouldn't compete with the national because the national inherently has better versions of everything that we can do. They provide more resources. They provide more kind of positive feedback by encountering people who are more kind of institutionally networked across the country. They count more. Presenting at the national counts more for most people's like metrics on advancing their careers. And the regional has other strengths, particularly accessibility, smaller scale conversations, things that really go to the heart of like our lives as researchers and scholars. But we have found in the past that effectively is not sufficient to sustain itself when the structure of the regional effectively mimics the structure of the national. So if you look at how I'm portraying this, effectively, this is what the seasons of our lives look like in terms of regional planning and national planning. The fall, as we are right now, is completely occupied by planning and organizing for the national meeting. and or completely ignoring the national meeting, which is a disengagement that we don't necessarily want to foster, but sometimes we are just exhausted and don't even participate in planning for the national. So right after the national, pretty much what happens in the winter is regional organizers have to start expending an enormous amount of time planning for their spring meeting. So this is about getting a call out. This is about organizing programming units, leading to eventually this spring meeting. But in the background, participants in the national meeting are exhausted from participating in the national meeting. So we have effectively created an environment in which we need these people who are participating at the national level to start contributing ideas and panels and proposals for the spring, but they tend to be exhausted. And because the regional feels like it counts less, we can't really compete with that. So when the actual meeting happens, regional members spend their time and energy actually participating in the regional meeting. But meanwhile, this is the exact same time that the national organizers, so the people who are the programming unit chairs, have to spend their time actually planning for the national meeting. So there's almost always this like near intersection where effectively we're organizing calls for papers at the national. I'm also a programming unit chair for Latin American studies in religion at the national AAR. We're organizing all of these, like trying to get people to have good panels and think and find out whose books are coming out. Meanwhile, we are also trying to have this spring meeting. And then this all collapses ourselves into the exhaustion of the summer, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with, where we all kind of become isolated kind of workers in which we're on our own schedules, and we try and make up for the year of being kind of exhausted and having our energy split across many different tasks by completing a bunch of our real professional work in the summer. And we largely do that in isolation. And then again, the cycle begins again where we all have to scramble to participate for the fall national meeting. So this is really a recipe for making the regional detract from our professional life rather than contribute to it. And that's a shame because, again, of these incredible strengths of accessibility and small scale conversation that are possible at the regional level. So we're reconceiving how we can do this in a way that does not cause this energy problem. So instead of having a programming unit, so the programming units are effectively things that exist to organize the annual meeting, we are instead dividing the programming unit into 3 separate kinds of units. And this is the most important thing to understand about the new structure, we're focusing on regular meetings throughout the year, small scale meetings that happen in kind of on a remote scale that are about assisting, practically speaking, the work of members. So we'll start with the one that is probably the closest to what a programming unit does, and that is a research unit. So a research unit would be a small scale unit rooted in a subdiscipline, just like the programming units tend to be in the regional and then certainly are so at the national level. And so one way of thinking about this is it's a programming unit that just works year round instead of working only exclusively in the lead up to the meetings. It's going to be organized by a research unit chair, so somebody will be in charge of this. They'll largely be, or they'll likely be a member of the subdiscipline. And we're not talking somebody who's necessarily like at the top of their field in the subdiscipline or somebody who has a bunch of obligations in it, but just anybody that kind of wants to collaborate around bringing people together within their subfield. We're going to strongly encourage that all of these research units are corresponding to national programming units. So for instance, if you want to start a research unit in the Northeast region and you want it to be on the history of Christianity, that's great. There's already a history of Christianity programming unit at the national. This makes a lot of sense. If you want to do something that's really bespoke to New England, that there isn't a national unit, we would discourage you from doing this, but only because we envision a lot of the work of these research units to effectively synergize with the work of the national meeting, as opposed to effectively do it separately and never have conversations. I've always thought that's a little weird. I've been a unit chair both at the regional and the national level, and it's so odd that we don't actually have any structured way of having conversations between programming units at regional and national levels. We tend not to have those conversations. So at these regular meetings that we're envisioning for the research units, we're really imagining and we're thinking the scale should not detract from everybody's work life. We do not want to have like 2 meetings every week. That sounds like a nightmare. What we want is meetings that are regular at punctuation periods that basically allow you to keep tabs on subdisciplines. So we're kind of guessing this will probably happen like once a month, and they'll really focus on the things that are just hard to take care of in a semester schedule or in a quarter schedule in the regular kind of work life. And these are things like reviewing recently published works. Like I'm always really upset when I find out that a work came out like 2 years ago and I just didn't notice because I was teaching 3 classes at the time and I just could not pay attention to what was coming out. And so I lost track of it. And then I really should have read it because it was like core to what I'm working on. So really keeping a rhythm in which we talk about recently published works. This could be the work of the research unit. Bringing in speakers that are within a subdiscipline, so somebody who's making major strides in the history of Christianity, say, this would be an opportunity to bring them in, have a smaller scale conversation, again, emphasizing kind of the root value of the region. And then we really imagine that one of the core things that they contribute, and this is part of the synergy with the national, is pre-planning panels that will appear and can be proposed kind of as a unit to the national programming units. National programming unit chairs love this. They love having pre-made panels proposed to them because it takes a ton of the complexity out of their own work and really prevents the kind of dud panels where you have basically introduced a couple of really incompatible people and then they don't kind of collaborate well together by having a panel that kind of is pre-made and pre-worked out. This is why we would strongly recommend that a research unit would correspond with a national programming unit. But again, not be less than the national programming unit, because the national programming unit will still basically just be emphasizing the national meeting. This will be really kind of like integrating research and the society into your work life throughout the semester, as opposed to these punctuated time periods. Okay, so we also envision, I make some suggestions here on this slide about what we envision a research unit doing programming at our regional annual meeting. And this could look like traditional panels for the research unit because they're so similar to a programming unit. But really, we're thinking like state of the field workshops, have a conversation about what we all think is happening in a subfield, having really practical conversations with academic press editors. The regional meeting, again, being small scale and being accessible, is a really good way to get press editors into a room with people who have like core interests that are publishable within these presses and giving them opportunities to pitch and kind of erasing the mystery around that process of communicating with editors. And then organizing special issues for journals. It's the new edited volume. Everybody likes doing special issues for journals. We just feel like this is very practical use of our time in an annual regional meeting. All right, so that's just the one unit. So the second unit, and we imagine that this unit, well, probably a lot of you have encountered experiences with this, but we're calling them working units. And probably the best example that most people have experience with is that group that helped you write your dissertation if you've already finished your PhD, the group of people that just held you accountable in those moments when you were working on isolated work. These are variously called writing accountability groups. A lot of colleges try to offer this for new faculty employees. And then there's a couple of like national nonprofits and that really focus on this, like NCFDD. And what they really are effectively regular meetings in which people talk just explicitly about their goals for their projects. It's about, I'm trying to write this journal article. I want to get it done in the next 6 months. These are the milestones that I want to hit. And then you just have conversations in which other people are basically holding you accountable. And you can talk through the things that have been creating like impediments for you. What is it about the national political climate or your institutional situation that is causing you to struggle to get your work done? We really miss those things, especially when we get out of graduate programs, and it's very difficult to kind of create them ourselves, and then they can fall apart really quickly, especially if we have multiple institutional affiliations or uncertain employment. This is really something that we think that the regional can provide for people, that we can organize these working units and basically combat the isolation, especially during the summers. So this would be organized by a working unit chair, and we would say that there really doesn't have to be disciplinary overlap for members of these units. In fact, it's probably going to work better if people are coming from a variety of different career positions, people who are retired, people who are tenured, people who are untenured, people who are not on the tenure track, people who are just independent scholars. Like they can all work together within these working units, and we think that that'll create a broader sense of professional community that will really combat this isolation that is just like this defining feature of our social lives as academic professionals today. So it's really about supporting these achievable deadlines, and that's why the regular meetings, these might happen more frequently than once a month, but maybe just once a month, in which you all get together in a Zoom room like this, and you check in with each other, and just be friends and be friendly support for getting people's work done. This would be really, it's kind of the fit into the national meeting would really be, it's kind of those things that we all actually do when we go to the national meetings or annual meetings, which is that we make sure to get coffee with all the people that we want to meet, that we only see once a year. And we really think that actually the working units can organize stuff like this, in which you basically become friends over the course of a year working together. And then at the annual meeting, you can come and celebrate each other's work and milestones in a really kind of mutually supportive way. We also kind of envision that these would be good units for doing job market workshops. Frequently, we are hired by people that are not in our subfield and know nothing about our subfield, and it is difficult to talk to people outside of our subfields about our core research. So these are groups that are naturally going to be organized like this. They're going to look a lot like departments look, which is diverse faculty with diverse concentrations, and so they'd be great candidates for helping people figure out how to get jobs and talk to people on the job market. You notice I have this note here about being supported at the bottom, supported by the vice president. And if you look at the previous slide, supported by the president-elect. This is kind of a side note. I would say that this isn't necessarily important for everybody who's not planning on being elected. But one of the other plans for the new structure is that there's going to be defined roles for the new presidential line so that they're supporting these unit chairs. So there's a top-level elected organizer who's effectively going through the presidential line and focusing on different elements of the regional society for each year, supporting those units. And that gives them practice in understanding the dynamics of the entire region. So at the point that they become the president, at the end of the line, they're really well qualified to understand both the research experiences that are going on in the region, the personal experiences that are going on in the region. And this is the last unit, which is just something that we've always struggled to fit into anything in the national or the regional level, and that's community units. So the community unit we envision as effectively facilitating ongoing relationships with members of the community outside the university system. This is something that was really kind of pioneered and worked really well in the Southwest region because of the regional coordinator being the president of a nonprofit called the Institute for Diversity and Civic Life. And she was really just very effective at bringing in stakeholders from the community in the Southwest around things like combating hate, educating people on religious literacy, training people at corporations to understand what religious discrimination looks like. It was very kind of practical in the context of the Southwest. And this is something that when academics have participated in this in the past, they really just feel like this is the stuff that we should be doing all the time. This is the stuff like being engaged in basically applying our professional expertise to supporting democratic and civic norms in our communities. It's just something that everybody's been very thirsty for, and it feels like the society should really be doing that. But the society has kind of never really had a model for doing this. So the community unit will work like this. It'll have a community chair that organizes people who are interested in supporting interactions with this community or conversations with this community over the course of a year. And the community chair will create an ongoing experience so that the community members don't come and find new organizers every year and don't know, because we frequently lose track of things year after year because we're constantly cycling in a way that the communities that we might work with are not cycling. And so the community chair is really about creating this continuity over time by engaging and supporting community members. These are regional communities. This is another strength that the regional has. We inherently have more proximity by having a regular meeting in the region that we can do this kind of support work. This might and probably won't involve the kind of model of regular meetings, but it could. It depends on really what the community chairs and the members of these units would really think that they wanted to work on. They would be supported by the president, who at this moment will be the most visible figure within the region. We'll have the title of the president. We'll be able to kind of leverage that kind of reputational power of the society to support community work. We really imagine that the focus of the community units will be the annual meeting, because this is a great opportunity. And if we continue to have the meeting at Princeton, to invite people into Princeton at the Princeton Theological Seminary and just have conversations with these stakeholders in which they can understand a little bit better about what we do in our institutions and what we can do to help people. This could also involve things like legal and policy primers for preparing people to be expert witnesses, and then in particular, collaboration with journalists. We frequently have tense relationships with journalists. The National AAR has been good by fostering an award in which they kind of they reward effective journalists who are on the religion beat. And this is something we could do at the regional level because regional and local reporting is really oftentimes much more impactful than national reporting for local communities. All right, so to pull that all together, what does the new work life look like? This is how we imagine the changes. The new model is a region that supports the work cycles of our members. And so this means that in the fall, we still think that members and organizer energy is focused on the national meeting. That's something that just is part of our society, is part of our discipline, is part of our work. But then when the winter happens, right after that annual meeting at the national level, members can return to the regional networks with new connections and research from the national because they'll still be part of these research units. So now they can bring all the connections that they made at the national back to the research units. They can debrief effectively about what had happened at the national and enact these plans that are frequently made at the national, but we go into Thanksgiving and then we go into Christmas, and then we're like, oh man, nobody wants to get an email around Christmas, but now I'm, grading all my finals, and what do I do with all this lack of time I have? And by the time we actually remember that we're going to follow up on the national, we've let a month or two go by. This is something that if a regular meeting of a research unit happens after the national, they can really help support this landing back into our professional lives and create a kind of softer experience, re-engaging. But more importantly, the regional organizers will really not have a lot of work to do because the annual regional meeting will not be so high stakes about reading papers and doing these things. They're going to be more low stakes, community support, things that are kind of collaborative with other professionals and with community members. And then really the community units who are kind of have less work or organizational work throughout the year will then kind of come on board to really help plan this integration in the spring. And then at the spring regional meeting, we really imagine that the annual meeting will just be, it will be high stakes in the sense that it will be high value, but low stakes in the sense that, you're not just like preparing a paper that you're really nervous for and getting yourself on a panel and then having this very intense professional discussion. But instead, you're having a meeting where you're meeting with your working unit. You finally get to interact and have a workshop in which you're, effectively being trained back into your subfield by all the other people in your subfield. And then national organizers in this moment when they're all exhausted because they're planning things are going to receive support from the regional meeting in which all of the plannings that the research units do now blossom into panel proposals that go to the national. And then that creates an easier process for the national programming unit organizers. And most importantly of all, this summer, this kind of like void, the sea that we all find ourselves on in the summer will instead be a sea that is supported by this regional work, that we will enter into this gap of energy and instead give things to our members as opposed to kind of let them off and be out in the wilderness by themselves. All right, so I'm going to stop there. And I think this is probably where we would transition to a Q&A or a break in the recording because that is a real different thing that we just proposed. So I'm happy to answer any questions and Ron and Matt can answer any questions that you might have about this proposal.
Thank you, Ron, for your leadership, and thank you, Justin, for that engaging and clear presentation. And for the I Love Lucy meme, which I think we all could use in our lives a little bit more. I want to just pause the recording and offer a space for reaction and reflection. If there are any items that you would like to discuss, this is a safe place in which to do so that will not be recorded. And again, if your question is something that I really feel like this probably should go to the larger community, I'll probably repeat the conversation and then post it to the recording. At the end, I'll have a few concluding remarks. So as soon as we're done with the Q&A, I will be sending out a form to make sure you're able to sign up if you're interested in learning more about participation, but we'll go there later. So I'm going to stop and listen a little bit. If we have a ton of questions, which would be a good problem to have, I would just ask that we move to the raising hand feature in Zoom, just so we don't have people talking over one another. But yeah. Is there anything we need to discuss and all of that? A question was just broached about the regional map and how this new region might be informed by that. So the short answer is that, first of all, I want to answer that in two ways. One, I want you to focus on the map, but not really. We have no restrictions across the country about participation in any region. If you decide you want to participate in the Pacific Northwest Conference, there is absolutely zero reason why you should not do that, up to and including holding some kind of leadership in that region. That happens all the time. We do it. In fact, one of the leaders of the Pacific Northwest lives in Toronto. So, that's okay. What we're looking for is dedicated people that are interested in supporting regional work. We're not necessarily concerned about where you lay your head at night. Okay. So that's answer number one. Answer number two, the actual answer, is that what we decided to do is, in reforming AAR-Northeast, we took the Amtrak train corridor and we made that a region. So it's basically the large cities from DC up to Boston that we wanted to make accessible via train. That was the rationale. So that's really why we did it. And then, so basically now Pennsylvania has been broken out into, for all intents and purposes, Philadelphia, which goes with us, and then everything else, which goes to, I believe it's Eastern International. And so, there you go. But again, Odell, it matters, but not really. The only thing that it actually matters in is when you get e-blasts from national, your zip code will get queued in that way, because that's how they break their e-blasts out. Other than that, there's really no rationale. There are going to be 3 ways you can get involved in the region. Or 3 options generally, and I'm going to send out this link here in just a moment. The first is sitting or standing for an elected position. We're reconfiguring all of the regions so that their organizational structure mirrors that of national, so that we'll be running in a much more streamlined way. That does not mean, however, that regions can't decide to have different offices on their board that advise the committees that are in the formal leadership structure, the presidential line. So there's all sorts of ways we can get people plugged in if you're wanting to get plugged in. The second way is what I'm calling just a behind-the-scenes role. I don't exactly know what that would look like, but we're going to need someone to serve, for example, as treasurer, as someone that might do some social media, as things that people that are working, even if it's just in aiding the program committees in various ways. We're looking for folks that want to participate in that way as well. And then a third way would be in a leadership role within the units that Justin has just spelled out. I'm going to ask Justin, if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit before we end about ways folks could get plugged in leadership in those 3 units that you were discussing. While you're doing that, I'm going to send out that form to this group so that you all have it. And then at the bottom of that form, you will see a link, not a link, a form field that will allow you to submit whether you're interested in joining a research program or community unit, and what specific areas you might be interested in. We're going to take that information and we're going to, in the next few weeks, so you got some time if you're watching the video, we're going to be reaching out to folks, and I'll be checking that regularly. So if you don't get it done until national, no big deal. We're still going to be rolling folks in, we hope, in the coming months. Justin, why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, just speak a little bit to the ways in which you imagine leadership structures happening. And then while you're doing that, I'm going to send that form out.
Yeah. So I would say we imagined that these will be volunteers for the unit chair positions, and we had a couple of ideas of who might be great candidates for each kind of unit chair. The research unit chairs, really people who have had experience working at the national with specific programming units, have a lot of experience working with those units in a subfield. That feels to us, especially if they're already a programming unit chair at the national, either enlisting former unit chairs to work on these regional research units, or really anybody who is in that stage in their career where staying on top of their field is very important, and then they could volunteer their time to do so. The working units, we really imagine that there's kind of two really great possible candidates for this. One of them is advanced doctoral students. Advanced doctoral students really need this kind of work discipline. They are frequently, oftentimes, already engaged in this kind of like supporting each other at the dissertation level. And so if you happen to be familiar with any advanced doctoral students that might be interested in volunteering their time for something like this, they would be great candidates for these working units. And then we also thought this would be a good opportunity for our more senior tenured faculty members in the region who effectively feel very settled in their careers. If they feel like they've kind of lost track of or not connected with people who are across the region and want to kind of foster those connections, that would be a great opportunity for somebody to run a working unit. It's going to be sociable. It's going to be connecting people that you would not regularly meet and create these opportunities to maintain kind of lasting connections in your career. And for the community units, it's people who already have connections with members of the community. We are really, there's no restrictions on how we would envision a community unit. So if you have strong feelings about community obligations, I know one of my colleagues who works in Baltimore works significantly with public art projects, and we hope that there'll be people who want to work with like local museums and curators to get basically professional academics working on religion more involved in the kind of public-facing work of our discipline, which really works in the context of museums. So if you already have those connections and you want a ton of support because you want to be connected with all the other people in the region that are also interested in that and just kind of generate new support, please just send us a message that you're interested in doing something like that, and we will, the sky's the limit for creating units like that. And really think creatively. We are not, this is not draconian. This is not being decided from the top down. This is something that I hope everybody will feel like they're participants and stakeholders in. And you should think of this as a canvas that you can create your vision of a better region and a better society with this new structure. So, take control.
Thank you for that, Justin. Ron, I'm going to close us out with a concluding remark or two, and then let everybody back to their Tuesday evening. Ron, do you have any concluding remarks? Okay. Are there any questions we might address while you've got our attention that we didn't get to earlier?
Can we pause the recording?
Yes. A question was just broached about what the change in structure might mean very specifically to the regional meeting each spring. Justin?
Yeah, so, and specifically, will it be a space where we could have traditional panels that look like a panel you might have at the national meeting? And we do think that there is space for that. We did not want to get rid of that. We think that some of those panels work really well. We just don't necessarily think that a program filled entirely with those panels also competing with each other on time works particularly well at the regional. So this is where we thought maybe each research unit, this is really just a proposal, that each research unit could have one panel where they really bring together exactly what they have been most interested in throughout the year, in which they are presenting their work, or inviting people who are in their fields to kind of do a core panel that then dovetails out to a larger subdisciplinary conversation. Now, if there ends up being a lot of push where the research units want more and they want to do more traditional panels, we would be totally responsive to that. But we imagine that's kind of the work that we're hoping that the research units really can decide for themselves and explore formats that are new and newly useful in actually furthering people's research interests in a way that like the traditional panel sometimes limits, because there's a ton of space for the traditional panel at the national meeting, and our philosophy is really about not competing with that energy and model. But that's a great question. We thought about it a lot. Yeah.